All right, so one thing I want to talk to you about is how do you bring up, I guess this goes against, for a bunch of stuff like church discipline and stuff like that, but because of the Kavanaugh thing and the whole country being focused, this always happens, one thing and the whole country's focused on this for like a month, but with the whole Kavanaugh thing and people bringing up accusations, obviously with the Hollywood thing, probably I would say, what would you say, the last year about sexual predators coming out and allegations coming out from anywhere from a decade to 30 years ago. What does the Bible say about bringing up accusations against somebody? And then the second part to that question is, what's the biblical response as believers to those accusations? And does it matter, if it's a believer or not a believer? So I'll let you just go.
Well, Jesus in Matthew chapter 18, he talked about how conflicts are supposed to be handled. And in the context, it's talking about between believers in the church. And let me just read you what he said instead of just telling you what he said. He says, "If your brother has sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you've gained your brother. But if he will not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of two or three witnesses every word may be established. And if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector." And Jesus goes on to assure everybody that God's going to be involved in that whole thing. And so what is supposed to happen when you have conflicts like that is you have two or three people who judge the situation by taking the two parties that are involved and having them talk about the issue in front of each other. It's not the Kavanaugh situation where one person comes in and testifies, and then another person comes in and testifies immediately after, and there's no cross-examination in the sense of talking about the problems with the situation, with what's going on in the context of two people together is not what the Bible talks about. In fact, Jesus got this from the book of Deuteronomy, and so we've talked about this a couple of times in the last 2 months or so. But this is the law of witnesses in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verses 15 through 21. It says, "One witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or any sin that he commits. By the mouth of two or three witnesses the matter shall be established. If a false witness rises against any man to testify against him of wrongdoing, then both men in the controversy shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days, and the judges shall make careful inquiry. And indeed, if the witness is a false witness who has testified falsely against his brother, then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother, so you shall put away the evil from among you. And those who remain shall hear and fear, and hereafter they shall not again commit such evil among you. Your eye shall not pity. Life shall be for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, and foot for foot." And that's just justice. That's where we get our principle of you are considered innocent until proven guilty. And that phrase gets thrown away, or it gets thrown around a whole lot. And I think that the fact that we use it so commonly takes away the effect of that. What that means is that it means that a person is not guilty until someone can prove it. Not until they accuse him. It's until they can prove it. He is not guilty. And so when you look at these situations, what's supposed to be happening is a guy is supposed to be able to confront his accuser. And again, that comes from the Bible. And he is supposed to be able to cross-examine that accuser. And so in the case that Jesus was talking about with situations in church, you have a problem with somebody and you try to straighten it out with that person, and then it doesn't work, and so you get me and Mike to come up, and then we watch you try to straighten it out, maybe ask questions of both of you to try to figure out what happened so that every word can be established. And the point of that whole thing is in the context of two brothers or two sisters, the point of that whole thing is that I'm there and Mike is there to correct the situation if it needs to be corrected. Because you may be accusing him and he didn't really do anything wrong.
Sure.
And you're just being picky and trying to tear him apart. and he may actually be wrong, and he needs to turn and repent and that kind of thing. So in that case, 2 or 3 witnesses are there to establish every word that's taken place, and then we become the witnesses that you see in the book of Deuteronomy. But in any case, what's supposed to happen is the 2 people who have the problem need to face each other. That's what the Bible teaches, and they are to be examined to see whether or not the things that they're saying are true. If they are not true, and this is in the case of a court situation like you had in Deuteronomy 19, then in Old Testament Israel, whatever the person wanted to have happen to the supposed offender was supposed to take place on them. And what that is tort reform. That keeps people from bringing false lawsuits and false accusations, and that's the point. So if I have a problem with you and I want to accuse you of something that gets rid of you or takes your property away, I can accuse you of something that's a capital crime. And if all it takes is the accusation, then you can be put to death. But in the Bible, the accusation has to be proved. If it's not proved, and I'm found to be a false witness, I'm found to be lying. In other words, the events, so for example, couldn't have happened because you have an airtight alibi, and it's found that I'm just trying to get you, then they would put me to death in that situation. If I was trying to take your property, then they would take my property in that situation. That would be a good incentive not to bring frivolous lawsuits against people. So in situations like this, it has to be proved. And so you don't get to just accuse somebody of something, and certainly anonymous accusations are not to be listened to. So this is something that happens in my fellowship all the time, in the sense that I will get anonymous letters from people or anonymous emails from people talking about somebody in my fellowship and saying they're doing this and they're doing that. If you're not willing to sign it, I'm not willing to read it. And if a person is accusing, and again, this happens all the time, if a person is accusing somebody, whether it's, if it's on the phone or if it's in a letter, if they're accusing somebody, the first thing that I will ask them is, have you talked to that person yourself? And, actually, there's never been a time when I've had to ask that question that it hasn't been the case. They've never gone and talked to the person. What they want to do is they want to come to me, and they I'm the boss, or I'm the pastor, or I'm whatever, and they want me to go and get them and do that stuff. And it's not right. It's not to be done. And in situations like this situation, when somebody is investigating this kind of thing, there has to be some evidence that the thing actually took place, and the evidence cannot be he did this to me and I felt really bad my whole life. That is not evidence. Mm-hmm. That's just statements. That's just accusations. And so there has to be evidence. And so you're looking for witnesses. You're looking for some kind of corroboration. Do we, place, dates, times, all of that kind of stuff. And so in our system of justice, which is not confined to law, in our system of justice, what we do is we treat people as if they're innocent until it's proved that they're not. And if we don't do that, we're not going to have a civil society. This is stuff that takes place in communist countries. This is stuff that takes place under dictatorships. And so I'm pretty upset about the whole situation that I saw. I watched some of the hearing, and just ridiculous. You have people in their 60s and 70s going through some dude's high school yearbook. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And I was pretty hot about the whole thing. I have had lots of situations where I have been involved with people who have been traumatized because of sexual molestation and that kind of thing. That's something that happened in my family, and so I'm familiar with this. Both my sisters have issues with those things. And so I'm not unsympathetic about that. But you don't go making an accusation against a guy in that kind of situation without having some good backup. And what Miss Ford should have done was had backup. She should have had evidence before it ever came out. If it was something that had been done privately, that would have been a good thing for her, and I think it would have been a good thing for Kavanaugh. I think it would have been a good thing for the nation, because they could have done a real investigation in the sense of talking to them, trying to figure out if there was any reality to it in a private setting, and you wouldn't have had the grandstanding that took place, the political grandstanding that took place in that situation, and it would have been more discreet, and it would have been better done. That was just nothing but reality TV. That was just nothing but a soap opera.
Which seems to be the way we're going. All right, so two questions here. And the first one, I don't really know how to say very eloquently, but, I read about the Founding Fathers specifically because it's the country that we live in is set up from people that came from issues we're having right now, right? And so when they decided to do the branches of government and stuff, they went to the Bible. A lot of them were believers. And the stuff they're pulling is from Scripture, right? My opinion, but I think you can prove that. A lot of the problems they talked about that we would have were that you're not going to be able to keep this whole thing up if you're not a moral people, if you're not a religious people. Because even though we have, the courts with jurors, which is supposed to have eyewitness testimony and a lot of the concepts that you already talked about, it's based off people that are righteous, that they're not liars, that they want to get to the truth. They don't want a three-ring circus. They're interested in somebody's integrity and not destroying their life. You can't have that system of justice if you're not a moral or what they claim to, religious people. We know what their meaning was. Yeah. Do you think that we're to the point in our country now where we're not that anymore, and now we're having this free-for-all?
Well, I've been involved in lawsuits where, or court situations where that's the court completely failed, and we had a guy who came to our church, actually came during school hours, was screaming and yelling at teachers, was cussing my wife out as she was bringing him back to my office, came into my office and acted in a threatening manner, and the city decided to charge the guy with trespass and some other things, and he got off scot-free. And the reason he got off scot-free is because he lied through his teeth. And we had, gosh, man, it was probably we had 14 people that saw the events, and many of them were there and testified, and the jury believed that the defense lawyer came up with a whole story that was nothing but a fabrication, and the jury ended up believing it. And so, again, you stand in front of a group of people and you say, "I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God," and you're a stinking liar. Then it's not going to work. Not unless you can prove that the guy's a liar at that point. And then we have perjury rules, but or perjury laws, but it's not very often that people get nailed for perjury and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's like if you're not going to be somebody who tells the truth, then it's going to be a real hard situation to make sure that justice is actually done. Right. And so, yeah, I agree with you totally.
All right, second question. We know that Satan's the accuser of the brethren, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of this stuff, I think, is pure satanic in the sense of this is exactly how he does it against Christians. So what do you do if you're in, we're talking about Kavanaugh. What do you do if you're in that spot, if you're being accused of something, or something comes up in your life where Satan's just ready to slam you? A lot of discussion on Facebook of Kavanaugh should have done this. He should have apologized. He should have not said anything. Like when Jesus was standing before, he was silent before his accusers and stuff. What are we supposed to do in that situation?
Right. With Kavanaugh, I don't know that the guy's a believer in the first place, and so it sounds like he's a churchgoer. Sounds like he's a Roman Catholic, and so I don't know if he actually knows the Lord. And right. So I'm not gonna take and put a bunch of stuff on this guy, and I'm not gonna second guess him. that's a ridiculous position to be put in. And he was put in that position by people who were being ridiculous on all kinds of levels. There was nothing good about that situation. And so I'm not going to second guess the guy, but when I was watching the guy, what he did was he went through and he did his best to refute the accusations, and I wasn't there, didn't see it, can't tell you for sure what happened or what didn't. I can tell you that there's not enough evidence to convict the guy, and that's obvious, and so again in our system of law, that guy didn't do it unless you can prove it, and that's the way that people are supposed to be treated, and so we have a system that makes sure, that does its best to make sure that the innocent are not convicted, and sometimes that can mean that guilty people go free. But that's the way our system goes. You'd rather let 10 people who are guilty go free than put one innocent man behind bars. It's ridiculous to think that you would want anything else, and a lot of people are calling for that. As far as how a Christian is supposed to respond to that whole thing, I've had accusations placed against me, and they were vocal, and people were not brought forward. They weren't willing to come and talk to me personally, and I've done different things in those situations. Basically, I'm not a guy that goes around defending myself, and so the Bible talks about the fact that God's going to be my defense. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I'll repay, and so it would depend with me on the situation. If it was a situation where there's a bigger principle besides me that's involved in the defense, then I would absolutely stand up and do something. So so for example, if I've had situations where guys have come into church and they obviously have an agenda and they are attacking me, but they're attacking me with the purpose of undermining the fellowship and trying to take away disciples for themselves. Well, when that kind of stuff happens, I nail that. It's like I go after that because I'm called to be a shepherd, and at that point, it's not just about me; it's about a bigger issue. But when it's personal, when it becomes personal and they're personal attacks, I just keep my mouth shut, and I'll tell the truth in a situation, and if people don't like the truth, then I don't care. And I'll just move on. I don't go around defending myself. And so, for me, it would depend on the situation. What are the stakes that are involved? If it's me and my reputation, then I do care about me and my reputation. I care about it. And the times that kind of stuff has taken place, I've been very angry about it. But God is the one who protects me. And so I don't need to stand up for myself in that situation. And God's always been good to protect me, and so. But in other situations, when there's a bigger principle involved, I make the stand, and it's based on the principle. So
okay.